Okay, so my name is Alex. I'm one of the adult service librarians at Mamaroneck Public Library. I'm joined today by Sarah Bramble, who's one of the librarian. Excuse me, I'm tongue-tied. Who's a librarian at Dobbs Ferry. And I want to thank Dobbs Ferry Public Library as well as Tuckahoe Public Library for joining us today for this program. And without further ado, I want to introduce Peter Mandel, who's going to be our presenter today. So Peter is a travel journalist and children's book author, known for Jack Hammer on the children's book side. He's known for Jack Hammersam and Say Hey, a song of Willie Mays, which was featured in both the National Baseball Hall of Fame and the Smithsonian. And as a travel journalist and essayist, where he's going to be sharing his expertise with us today. His work has appeared in the Boston Globe, the LA Times, National Geographic, the Washington Post, and many more. His work has earned multiple Lowell Thomas Awards for excellence in travel writing, and his travel assignments have brought him all over the globe, from City of Penguins at the South Pole, fishing piranha in Brazil, camping in the African bush, and more, which we are lucky enough to hear about tonight. So without further ado, we're going to get started. I want to invite you all to please participate. If you have questions, you can either unmute yourself and ask them. You can put them in the chat. We'll be doing questions as we go along, and we'll also do questions at the end. So also, if there's anything you're already thinking about that you want to ask, you can put it in the chat now. You can write it down on a piece of paper. If you feel confident you're going to remember it, that's great. And we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to turn it over to Peter.
Super. Great intro. Thank you, Alex. And is Sarah, is that the other? Yeah, great. So just want to thank I think it's three libraries, and that's always fun for me. More the merrier. And as Alex mentioned, we're going to be touring around the globe, and be prepared, please, for a little bit of climate whiplash. We're going to go from very cold to very hot, et cetera, et cetera. But please don't be shy about piping up with a question, or maybe you've been somewhere that you're seeing on screen, or doesn't matter. But there are no silly questions when it comes to travel writing. So please don't worry about that. And there are no wrong answers. I tend to, when I do this, I'm doing this for quite a long time, I tend to both toss out some questions for you, just for fun, because it makes it more interactive. So don't be shy, pipe up. I'm wrong most of the time, as my wife would say. So join me. Okay, so this is just the first image you're seeing here. Hopefully everybody is seeing this. I use it as sort of my, introductory postcard image for the talk. What you're seeing here is, you'll see much more of it at the end. This is probably the most extreme place any of us humble tourists, whether we're writers or photographers or regular tourists or whatever, can get to. It's Antarctica. Someday, I wish I'd be around for this, but probably won't happen. Few very wealthy people get to go into, Earth orbit and stuff and write about that, but I'm not one of those. But so Antarctica is sort of, the most extreme of the extreme. We'll talk more about that in a minute. We're starting. Oh, where in the heck are we? Okay. Yeah, so we're starting cold. As you can see, I warned you. What are these? These are some quite large icebergs. We're not in Antarctica. We're at the opposite pole. We're in the high Arctic. One of the things I'll tell you a little more about later is sometimes unexpected stuff can shock you and excite you. You may know this from your travels, but for me, one of those things was the colors ice can take on. Okay, ice, being somebody who gee, I live in New England now, so gee, I know what ice looks like. But depending on sky color and other factors, ice can be really intriguing blue, and that minerals can cause that too, or almost a yellowy color. It's incredible. Um, we're starting out uh, on an adventure cruise, and we're aboard this ship here. Does this look like your normal cruise ship? Anyone take a cruise before? I know you have. I know you have. No, we say no. Hands, a thumbs down. And so, my wife and I, that's a perfect segue to what I was about to say, in that my wife and I are always meeting people who say, you know what, I love travel, but I'm never ever going to go on a cruise ship. Totally get it. A lot of the huge Caribbean bound and sometimes Mediterranean bound cruise ships nowadays are maybe not for those of us who love um, adventure. They're kind of like floating hotels and have a difficulty in high seas when they encounter them staying afloat. But I'm here to try to convince you that there are some extreme, interesting, in fact, fascinating places you can get to most easily if you open up and consider going by ship. In this case, I was writing about a cruise to the high Arctic and Greenland. I think this piece was for the Baltimore Sun. Anyway, to do this piece, I signed up for essentially an icebreaker cruise. Quark Expeditions, based, I think it's based in Connecticut. Pretty savvy group. They what they do is charter former working icebreakers and other ships and take passengers aboard them to cool places. This I hate to even mention the Russians, what's been going on, but the ship I sailed on, this one was called the Kapitan Klebnikov. It's a former Soviet icebreaker that was converted into a comfortable but not super luxurious cruise ship. Where do we think we passengers probably slept? Down here in the hold? Not down here. No, nothing, no portholes. There was actually an indoor swimming pool, believe it or not, like kind of like a lobster tank down here. Any thoughts? Ever pass Rikers Island prison on the highway? I have, driving in and out of the city. And this box thing kind of reminded me, when I first saw it, of driving into the city and seeing Rikers Island. And I'm here to tell you that this is where we passengers were put up, and perfectly comfortable, accommodations, not super luxurious. So that was the addition that allowed passengers aboard. When you take an adventure cruise, in almost every case, not every case, um, even if you're in extreme conditions, it's really tropical and hot, or it's really freezing cold. Um, Passengers are encouraged to get off the ship and are taken off the ship in safe safe ways to hike around or motorboat around to see the local sites. In this case, this is a bunch of us passengers on our icebreaker cruise. We lined up, gee, maybe it was twice at each day, to be helicoptered around to see, oh, walruses, icebergs, ho hum, stuff like that. Um, Not only that, but back to ice for a minute. Has anyone ever been far enough north to see the ocean? even if it's reasonably rough, get a sort of a skin on it as it begins to freeze, and then see it turn slushy, and then you'll see ice chunks form, and then ice flows. Anyone ever see that? You have? Wow. Sarah, where have you been?
Well, I've been like I don't know if this counts, like 5 miles from my house on the Hudson River at Beacon.
No, it doesn't
The
count,
Hudson
Sarah. You're
freezes and
disqualified.
oh, well.
No, of course it counts. But so is the Hudson been freezing lately? That's amazing.
The last couple of years it
Mhm.
hasn't, and it's really interesting to see because the water comes up to the coastline where there are an awful lot of rocks and and even beaches and gravel beaches and sandy beaches, but there um I guess the water just takes an image of the land, and so some of the
Oh, so you're seeing ice that sort of is sculpted, kind of.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it's like frozen in movement, so they almost look like frozen waves.
Fantastic. That's really a great experience. We'll talk a little more about that actually. So anyway, that was just another attraction. Thank you, Sarah. You know, notice that we passengers have this, bright yellow parka with the Quark Expeditions insignia. These are expensive, highly insulated parkas that, gosh, it must have cost, Quark $500 a person. We got them free before we met our icebreaker. Why would a cruise line, why would a adventure travel company send passengers a free, uh, really expensive parka?
Well,
Well,
I think they probably want to, limit their liability and make sure you're properly
yeah,
prepared.
bingo. Exactly right. Um, we passengers always bring the right gear?
Oh,
We do
sure.
not. I am among the most guilty, being adopted New Englander. I'm always bringing my LL Bean corduroys or fleece vest and stuff when I should be bringing something more insulated. So that's a really good answer. Optic yellow, well, not a bad thing in case somebody gets, mm, you wouldn't last long in the Arctic waters, but in case you get separated from your ship, also a little bit of advertising, right? With our Quark patch. I still wear mine. All right, we'll take some questions just a minute, but we're no longer in the high Arctic, but we're staying cold for another series. This is an easier trip for people to get to. Um, if you're interested, don't know if going on a polar bear safari is of interest. It was for me and for my editor at the Boston Globe. There's a place in northern Manitoba, Canada, the small town of Churchill, that is known really for only one thing, and that thing is as a jumping off place for tourists to go on polar bear safaris, believe it or not. Why do why are polar bears hanging out near this nowhere little town in northern Manitoba? Well, it's on the shores of Hudson Bay. Polar bears, we know that they're endangered. We also know, if we've been to some zoos, not every zoo, you may have seen polar bears swimming behind plexiglass. I don't know if you've seen this at the Bronx Zoo or something, but they are great swimmers. That's the way they move most easily. And the way they like to hunt is to swim after prey. So late fall is when, if you're interested, if you want to go on a polar bear safari, late fall is when you would fly up to this little nowhere town, and the polar bears will cluster around waiting for Hudson Bay to freeze so they can go on their winter hunt. And how will you actually see these bears? Well, it's not like a zoo where they're in our space, okay? In this case, we humans are in the space of the bears, which is a great thing. So it makes all the difference. And so you'll board a tundra train um, to ramble around, not on tracks, but on giant ATV tires. Um, the tundra train that you will be on for about a week, it has cars like an Amtrak train. This is the caboose, the bunch of passengers on the back of the caboose. It has a bunk car with a wood stove. It has a lounge car. It has a dining car, etc. Okay. Um, so what's the point of this tundra train? Well, it's to get we observers, we tourists, exactly where the bears are. And after a few days, oh boy, after a few days, there were people, I'm not making this up, there were people who were actually seeing enough bears. They didn't want to see any more bears. They're bored. Um, I was like, you got to be kidding me. Okay. But that's up to you. The bears cluster around the tundra train. Like this female, they're very interested in licking the tires. How come? Who knows? Well, bears like salt. Okay. Every vehicle in the North Country has salt somewhere on it. So that's one reason. The other reason is they're curious. Can bears be dangerous? Very dangerous. Okay. All bears, in fact, but polar bears, like grizzlies, in fact, are among the more threatening large bears for humans. But your tundra train is jacked up enough on the high tires that the closest they can get, and this was kind of a cool aspect, was as you went from car to car, there was like a cross hatching metal grating between cars. And I wish I had a good photo of this, but we had bears rearing up and licking giant pink tongues, licking the steel lattice work between the cars right under our boots, which I wish maybe somebody got a good shot of it. It wasn't me. Speaking of me, this is young me. Um, like any tourist slash writer, I'm also always a tourist when I'm writing. I don't personally want to be, a Mr. Know-it-all kind of travel writer because I just think writing is more fun to read when somebody approaches a destination as if they were a kid or if they were just a regular person. So that's what I am and how I try to write. But I always, as a souvenir for myself, I'm always hoping to find an interesting sign that I can get a shot of. And in this case, because the good folks who live in this town of Churchill are so used to polar bears padding around their area, the only place I could find a polar bear warning sign
Mhm.
was at the town dump. How come? Why do we think there would only be a sign? Yep. Sure, you're raising your hand.
I think that they're at the dump because since the weather is getting hotter and hotter, they have to find food, but the food isn't like available, so they go
Very
look.
good. What a great answer. That's exactly right. What's your name, please?
Author?
Arthur,
Yes.
like King Arthur. Okay, excellent. Well,
Mhm.
you really nailed that one. So true. And in fact, I don't know if you guys have problems in Mamaroneck and that area, but even here in Rhode Island, bears often hang out at the dump because their bears are like a lot of other animals. They want to get the easiest meal they can get their paws on. So very good. This is how my story ended up in the Boston Globe. I decided, and my editor agreed to combine it with a trip I took down to the very tip of South America, where you'll find a bunch of penguins down at the southern tip of Argentina. But so just as an aside, this because my story ended up, in case you're interested in travel writing, my story ended up on the front of the travel section. It's always a good outcome. You never know what an editor's going to choose to put on the front. You get paid a little bit more. If they use more photos of yours, you get paid more for that. In this case, it's just fun for me because the editor, this is before newspapers were in a big decline they're in now, and the editor commissioned this cool kind of nutty art. So that was fun. Before we get warm and tropical, questions? Yeah. Yeah,
I have a question.
sure.
Were you only looking to photograph polar bears, or were you looking for other animals?
That's really good. Another really good question. I'm always open to writing about and photographing anything that pops up. Okay, so this is me. That even though polar bears were the big draw up here in Churchill, I was also hoping to see an Arctic fox. They're white foxes, or an Arctic hare, a white type of rabbit. I never did see those, but I was open to it. Or snowy owl. Have you ever seen one?
Um, no, because I used to live in Australia, so we didn't see any of
How about a snowy koala bear? Have you seen one? No.
No, but I've seen koalas.
Yes, love it. Okay, so we're gonna change climates dramatically. We are again on an adventure type of cruise. In this case, we're on a riverboat cruise on one of the world's great rivers, the Amazon in Brazil. And what an adventure this is. If you're interested, you fly into Sao Paulo, Brazil, and then take another plane to the jungle town of Manaus, where it's really a pretty nice town, actually. And they build riverboats like my riverboat, which is called the Tucano, the Toucan. They build them locally out of beautiful wood, and they're quite comfortable, air conditioning, believe it or not, pretty good food, top deck. In the evening, you're up there having a Brazilian cocktail or something, and you see squadrons of brightly colored parrots soaring overhead. Like, as I mentioned, venture cruise ships are constantly ferrying you ashore if you want to go. In this case, we got to hike around in the jungle. It's quite an experience. I'll mention a little more about that. Um, but what's this? This is a local boat used for something on the Amazon River. Any guesses what it might be used for?
Oh,
There's a clue.
Fishing?
Yeah, it's a good guess. Good guess. And you'll see a fishing picture in a minute. This is something a little more unusual. Um, this is a church, believe it or not. This is a church that sails up and down the river from town to town. Why is this doing this? So this is the church. A lot of the areas along the Amazon were, in many cases, missionaries traveled there and converted a whole bunch of the indigenous people. So the local priest sails this small church up and down from village to village. Why does the priest do that? Well, um, if you try to get around from town to town or village to village in the jungle, it ain't easy. Jungle's always growing back over roads. So a lot of what happens on the Amazon and Rio Negro rivers in Brazil, it's a lot like Venice in Italy, if you've ever been. It's really a wondrous place to visit because everything takes place by water. Coca-Cola delivery, funeral boats, fire boats, okay? But so that was pretty fascinating. Typical village along the Amazon. Love the colors and the little bit of and the design elements. How come the houses in our village are jacked up like this?
I think maybe because of the floods that they get.
Very, this guy's, hey, tell you what, Arthur, you travel around with me when I do these talks, okay? And I'll cut you in for part of the take, okay? He's good. He's good. You're right. Absolutely right. There's flooding at least twice a year along the river. My wife hates snakes and bugs, so she added her point was, well, maybe that'll help stop snakes and bugs. But you know what? Snakes and bugs are pretty good at getting into stuff. So who knows? Fishing. I think Arthur mentioned fishing. Does anyone, we did get to go fishing for these guys. We used steak, leftover pieces of steak from the previous night's dinner on board our riverboat. Some woman from, gosh, she might have been from Westchester County, had never fished before. She caught 28 of these guys, and the chef fried up a few for us to taste them. What kind of fish are we looking at, do we think?
Piranha.
Very good. These are piranha. And look at the teeth. I mean, when you fish for piranha using your steak, I'm not, I'm not by any means much of a fisherman, but it was interesting to watch how the guides, how careful they were bringing these fish aboard our, our skiff when we're fishing, because you've got fish thrashing around, chopping with razor sharp teeth. So quite an experience. And look at the flashing eye. Incredible part of the jungle. I should add that in the on the Rio Negro in the Amazon, the dolphins are very different from the dolphins we see. Ocean-going dolphins, river dolphins down in that part of the world have really large sort of um, frontal lobes, for lack of a better word, and they're pink. They're pink. There's so much wonder in the jungle. We're going to switch continents, but any questions in the chat or anything? Anything in the chat I should know?
We've got we don't have any questions, but people definitely want to travel. Somebody wants to go to Japan. Someone wants to go to Norway to see the Northern Lights.
Excellent. Well, we'll talk Japan just a minute. Excellent. Good to hear it. I'm sorry to move so quickly, but there are a lot of photos, and I want to be sure we don't, get miss some at the end. So we're in a completely different continent now. We're in Africa. This is a piece I did for the Washington Post, in which I traveled to a pretty unusual destination in Africa. This is Uganda, which I won't go into it, but it has all kinds of constantly having political problems. And that's the government, okay? But I just like to show this shot of just average little kids that I happen to pass in a countryish area of Uganda, because I've always found, maybe you have too, or maybe you haven't, that local folks often are completely really kind people and interesting and nice, even if the political situation in your country or in your area is kind of grim. Okay, and look at these bright smiles and the genuine kind of kindness here. I kind of like those school uniforms. Arthur, would you wear a school uniform like that?
Maybe, I guess so, because the colors.
I don't know if orange and yellow are the best combo, but these kids were so nice, and a lot of people in this unusual country to travel to do speak English. It used to be British colony. Um, First stop. The point of my going to Uganda was um, to write about safaris, write about an African safari in a country that really didn't have a whole lot of guides with guns and didn't have a whole lot of fences. So the point was for me to get up close and personal with wild animals. Um, so first stop was a rhino sanctuary. Uh, Me and my signs, gotta love that a rhino sanctuary has beware of the rhino. Well, that's good advice, right? So we thought, um, I'm trying to get the black background. Are you seeing a white background now? Or are you just seeing the image itself?
Oh,
Seeing this white surrounding the image?
yeah.
Is that
Yes.
distracting?
No.
Okay, okay. So anyway, so we thought I was with some other writers, photographers. We thought, oh well, we're not going to be able to just hang out with a bunch of rhinos. Um, as you guys probably realize, rhinos can be very dangerous. They're big and strong and aggressive and have these very sharp horns. But in fact, this being Uganda, we were welcomed and then told to just wander around in this field with a whole bunch of rhino. We did have a guide. He didn't have a gun. Um, so I don't know how he could have helped us, but I still remember the guy. He was about 5 foot 1 inches tall, and he weighed about 90 pounds, and his name was Opio Raymond. And at one point, one of the rhinos took an interest in a photographer and started snuffling and sort of pawing the ground in front of the photographer. And so he asked Opie and Raymond, well, if we're charged by the rhino, what should we do? And Opie or Raymond, I'll never forget this. He thought about it for a minute, rubbed his chin, and said, you should climb a tree. So we looked around. Does it look like a well forested area? Not really. I really just can't forget a whole bunch of us writers like trying to look casual, moving over to the trunk of that tree. Nobody was harmed. We were all fine, but it was interesting. This is at the lodge I stayed at. It's another sign. Caution, wild animals. One of the most exciting things about staying in Para Lodge is the sight and sound of wild animals all around you. However, please remember all these animals really are wild, and it would be most unwise to approach them closely, feed, or tease them. Well, being a reporter, I definitely wasted little time before going up to the front desk to ask why, had they had some kind of incident that caused them to put this warning sign up. Sure enough, a tourist with a cowboy hat on had tried to ride a hippo. This is supposed to be a hippo, okay? Um, that doesn't sound too bad, does it? Riding a hippo? Um, what do we know, if anything, about hippos? Ever meet a hippo in a dark alley or anywhere else?
I
You've
mean,
met
if you
them
go to the
probably.
zoo, you can watch them eat like a watermelon whole. So sounds like a bad idea.
Okay, that's a clue. That is a good clue. I guess I always kind of thought that maybe hippos were big and slow or something. I thought, well, maybe they couldn't harm anyone. I don't know if you remember there used to be a greeting card or poster that showed a hippo with his mouth open, and you could see all these broken teeth and stuff. Does that sound familiar? Doesn't matter. But the first time I was in Africa, this will be the experience of just about anyone who travels to Africa on safari. First time I was there, we had a Swiss guide who was very easygoing. It wasn't easygoing, but he didn't care if hyena came around or lion or elephant came around our camp at all. He could care less. The one animal he warned us about were hippos. And as it turns out, hippos kill by far more people in Africa than any other animal. Can you believe it? I certainly never knew that. And somebody asked our Swiss guide, Peter, well, what could a hippo do to me if he did catch me? And I'd never seen him react like this. He whipped around. He said, he will bite you in half. So back to Alex's watermelon being eaten whole. How strange. I mean, little guys look cute, don't they? And they look slow. They're not slow at all. They're quite fast. Um, who are these guys? They're not leopards. They look like leopards.
Cheetahs.
Very good, cheetah. What do we know about cheetah? Uh-oh. What do we know about cheetah?
They're
I get
fast.
They're super fast, okay? They are the world's fastest land animal, even though these guys are looking very lazy. They are very lazy. Like, I don't know if any of you guys have cats. My wife and I have always adopted shelter cats, and we love them. They're our family. Um, and cats can be quite lazy, even though they can also really turn on the jets when they want to. Right? Look how long these tails are. Woo. Good for balance. And you can take if you go on safari in Africa, you can actually walk with cheetah, with a guide, with a gun in this case. Cheetah don't usually go after game as large as we humans, okay? So you can walk along with them, which is fun. Here's a question. This is something I had no idea about till my guide explained. But look at this sort of mascara like dark drippy stuff coming down. It's part of their coloring from their eyes. Um, any guesses as to why evolution, nature has given them this?
Is that
I'll
for
give you.
vision in dark conditions?
That's funny you should say that. That's interesting because you sounds like you might know cats. Our cats are most active, 3 a.m. Okay, they're racing around the house, going crazy. Cheetah are among the few felines that hunt during the day. So if you flip your good guess around, what are we looking at? Ever see football or baseball players with a
Oh,
little blacking under their eyes?
oh,
Right?
like
So,
to protect them from the sun or just
yes,
what the
um,
reason, but
it's
it's think it's something similar.
yes, very similar, very good. So it's like essentially like anti-glare. If you want to test this out and you get Arthur, if you've got a black magic marker, your mom probably won't like me saying this, and you made some marks under your eyes in a bright sunny day, it'll cut the glare because your cheeks, the top of your cheeks, won't be reflecting um, the sunlight. So this is nature's anti-glare uh, uh, adaptation, which is kind of cool. Um, Giraffe, they're everywhere when you're on safari. This photo I got kind of lucky because there was a little drama added by there's a brush fire off in the distance here, which perfectly normal part of Africa, but it added a little interest to the photo. Giraffe are, as you know from the zoo, gentle, intriguing looking. If you're in Africa, I hope you get there. They're curious. They're curious. Um, Sometimes they will, in a thicket where they feel protected, they'll crane their neck down. If you can get about 20 feet away from them sometimes, and they will crane their neck down so they can sniff you and look at you. And then if you make a move or something, they'll scuttle away. But really fascinating looking. Um, I wish I didn't have this. I have a bar here that I'm trying to get rid of here. Why can't I do this? There it goes. Okay. So lion, obviously, for many people who go to Africa, this is their goal. They want to see lions. This is obviously a male lion, and if you've been to Africa or if you've read about it, um, you'll know that it's much easier to see female lions, the ones without the manes, than it is to see the males. Um, any guesses as to how come?
Well, I think that males like spend most of the time sleeping.
Boy, you are amazing, Arthur. How did you know that?
Well, I saw something is that like male lions kind of control the pride, and like since the females go hunting, they kind of like stay with the cubs and they also rest.
That it's not a rest, just like us guys, right? So you're right on both counts. Female lions, um, I like to say this, and it's true. Female lions do most of the work in the lion kingdom. Okay, and it's true, and I think in human world too. I've got to admit, we guys can be pretty lazy, lounging around on the couch and stuff. And as Arthur pointed out, the lions, it's like society back in the 1940s or 50s, where like the lions kind of control, as he pointed out, they're the boss. The males are the boss, but the females do 90% of the work. And when the females are successful in a hunt, they allow the male the first choice, chomps of the prey, which again, they need, I think, some enlightening feminism. It's not going to happen, but anyway, so very good, and it's fascinating. If you are in Africa, you'll see the female cats, or sorry, female lions work together beautifully in hunting. They trick prey. This male was just as close to our safari vehicle as he looks. I don't use a telephoto. And so he never once looked at us. Here we are, a bunch of tasty humans in a safari vehicle. He never once even met our gaze. Um, this is how excited he was before dropping off, dropping off for another nap. Probably had lunch. I'm not sure. But before somebody had asked about Japan, so we're about to take a little side trip there. Any questions so far? Don't be shy. Don't be shy. Please. Okay. So somebody mentioned Japan, that they were interested in going there. Well, both my wife and I have both been on different separate trips. She went with my cousin on a normal sort of tourist visit. I went for a Washington Post story I saw it from an unusual perspective, and I'll tell you about it. Um, what you're looking at here are historic straw sandals that Japanese travelers used to wear, and an old-fashioned straw hat. Why am I showing you that? Well, the story I wrote um, was about hiking from Kyoto to Tokyo on an ancient Japanese pathway. Japan if you haven't been, or even if you have, not everybody knows this, is crisscrossed with these walking paths that crisscross the whole country. Used to be used by everybody, shogun, salesmen, everyone who went from village to village used these ancient pathways. And you can, if you're interested, hike on them. There's a company, one of several, it's called Walk Japan. So I joined a group of hikers hiking the Nakasendo Way, which who knew? I never knew you could hike from Kyoto to Tokyo. It took 9 days through mountains and through all kinds of interesting terrain. Like here we are, our group hiking through a bamboo forest. Anyone ever hike around in a bamboo forest? You may have one in your backyard, I'm not sure. Bamboo can be very, very invasive, but the sound of wind whistling in through the bamboo and the trunks clicking and clacking together is quite extraordinary. Um, Looking out, Japan has many different climates within it. The small collection of islands known as Japan. This is looking out at mountains, including Mount Fuji. Um, this is how my story ended up in the Washington Post. The editor, I guess, was making a pun on, the fact that in my hike, I was exploring ancient pathways, and the pun was on the word ways, of course. I got to add that if you're interested in Japan, even though I saw it from this unusual hiking perspective, I spent enough time in Kyoto itself and Tokyo, and my wife and my cousin Lois spent quite a bit of time in villages and towns, that it's a real life-changing kind of place to go to. Why is that? Well, you know how life can be nowadays, where in many countries, we're pretty loud and we're pretty assertive. We want to grab everything we can and we want to succeed, and maybe we'll push some people aside when we strive to get to the top, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not saying Japanese don't have a streak of this, but in daily, day-to-day life, it's incredible to be in a culture where there are many people bowing to you constantly. Okay. Some people will not, women in particular, will not leave a room that you're standing in by turning around and walking out of it. They'll bow and back out of the room. People like cab drivers and other professions sometimes wear white gloves. So still an extraordinary amount of sort of very old-fashioned politeness, which I found really fascinating. Of course, the food's great too. We're going to move on to another. I'm sorry to race around here. It's a very, very different series. This is another shot of young Peter Mandel. What we're doing here is we're going to take a little visit to the world of flying in a commercial jet. I think there are a lot of travelers. We don't always talk about it. Most of us fly places. And I find that I meet a lot of people who are just not ever completely comfortable with the idea that giant steel objects full of passengers and drinks and food and baggage can get off the ground and zoom around the way they do so successfully. So I convinced an editor at the Boston Globe to let me try to get behind the scenes of what goes on in commercial jet. Okay. This is me patting in a friendly way a brand new Airbus A320 commercial jet, just as it came off the assembly line. Airbuses are made several places. This one was in Germany. To get to do this story, though, my editor said, "Oh, look, Mandel, that's a good idea. we'd like you to do it, but we need you to get in flying, be able to fly in the cockpit of a commercial plane, not just write about it from the outside. Problem. This was after 9/11. Suddenly, were we passengers allowed up in the cockpit? Nope. Okay. So I tried and I tried. I thought, well, maybe I'm not going to get to do this until Frontier Airlines, which is based in Denver. They really wanted the publicity, I guess. And so they said, okay, Peter, this is what we're going to do. You can fly to the Airbus factory in Germany where we're going to take delivery of a brand new commercial jet, this A320 that I'm up close and personal with. You can tour the factory too. And then I flew over there with a bunch of pilots and flight attendants, and I got to fly back in the jump seat of the cockpit, thanks to thanks to them wanting the press and me wanting to do the story. Um, so that was quite an experience. No, so much to tell. You know how new cars sometimes have plastic over the seats and stuff? You ever notice that? Doesn't matter. I don't get a lot of new cars. My car's a 20-year-old Mazda, but the brand new Airbus that we took delivery of and flew over the Atlantic to Denver so it could join the fleet of Frontier Airlines. It had plastic over all the seats, which I thought was kind of amusing. This is a shot I took from being in the jump seat behind the pilot here. Larry, somebody noticed he doesn't have his uniform because we're just flying this back. He's got jeans on. Of course, he would be in a uniform if you were flying in a regular route for Frontier. Um, Another aspect of this story that was really fascinating was, for me anyway, I got to train on a flight simulator just the way Frontier pilots train with a real instructor and all of that. So, as you may have read, flight simulators duplicate almost exactly the feeling and the buttons and the cockpit structure of a real plane. So at the end of my so-called training, obviously I'm not going to fly a real plane, but so I learned the basics, and for my sort of the end of your training, you get to do a little simulated test takeoff. Okay, so I was pretty excited, and you can when you're being trained um, for your test takeoff, you can. I asked my instructor, okay, for my takeoff, can you these simulators can imitate almost any of the world's major airports, okay, and they can imitate simulated weather conditions of any kind. So I asked him for the worst weather he was aware of for takeoff and the most dangerous airport that he knew of. So he chose, I don't know enough about airports to argue with him, but he chose LaGuardia. He feels it's difficult for takeoff. And he said, Mandel, I'm giving you thunder snow for your takeoff. Again, this is simulated, right? Do we know what thunder snow is? It's a blizzard with thunderstorm conditions. Okay, so you're going to have wind shear and stuff. So as I did my, pulled all the levers and buttons, and our simulator took off just perfectly well despite the weather, despite LaGuardia Airport, and we're circling around simulated New Jersey in our simulator. And my instructor said this to me. He said, I did something else without telling you during your takeoff. And I was like, well, what was that? He said, I cut out one of the two engines. And I never felt even a lurch or a bump. So if you're a nervous flyer, I know there are people who are. It's just amazing how, today's automated planes like the Airbus A320. I'm not promoting Airbus. Almost every plane would have been just fine in those circumstances. Um, Another part of my story, has anyone ever flown in a private jet? Alex, you have, right? Not yet. Okay. I hadn't. This stuff costs money. But anyway, because I'm doing a story, I got to do it. If you do it, you'll get this sort of fake. The pilot and co-pilot will give you this kind of like cheesy welcome aboard. You're like treated like a celebrity, of course, even though I'm not. Um, and so a couple of things were kind of surprising. Oh, the snacks and the 30-year-old scotch and all of that was not surprising. I expected that. Um, I was a little surprised that in a private jet, nobody stopped me from wandering around up to the cockpit and chatting with the pilot and co-pilot. Seemed a little odd to me. Also, nobody made me put my seatbelt on. I actually got a little angry because, like the rest of us, I'm used to flying in coach where you're badgered about this, that, and the other thing. Put your seat back up, put your seatbelt on, etc. Just seemed to me that things were a little bit lax. Okay, I'm turning into a crank, but it was kind of like I was the boss in the private jet, so that was good for my story. This is the sort of the end of the aviation thing, but this little therapy for me. This is my dad, my late dad, Paul Mandel, in the early 1960s. Dad is probably the reason I got into the whole journalism thing and became an adventure travel writer. I don't know if anyone remembers the old Life magazine, but Dad was a staff writer and editor for Life, and was lucky enough as a young guy. He died actually when I was a kid, but he had a really good gig as a writer. He covered the early U.S. space program, the Mercury space shots, John Glenn orbiting the Earth. This shot of Dad was in a Life magazine article where NASA invited Life photographer and Dad to check out a very, very early prototype of the Apollo capsule. Okay, very early. This is like 1963 or 64. One of the reasons I show this makes me laugh how rudimentary all this was. Doesn't that look like a dorm refrigerator? If you remember those. Questions before we soldier on? Anything?
I have a quick question for you if nobody else
Sure.
has anything at the moment. You had mentioned before that you didn't use a telephoto lens at any point.
Yeah.
Is that just like a personal choice? Is that um, for the quality of
Excellent
the
question. Yeah.
photo?
That's a really good question. I'd say most writers and every photographer use these super duper high-end Nikon single lens reflex cameras with a separate telephoto that's, expensive and highly good. For me, I'm often in weird places where I have to cross like a stream or something, and on some slippery rocks, and I for me, mobility is number one. Okay, so I've always used, and I've had a case where I've lost a camera, right? So I can't afford to lose like $30,000 lens or something. But so I've always used. It's a really good question. I've always used like a point and shoot, like a Konica camera with maybe 4 times zoom, and make the best of it. So excellent question. We're taking a little side trip into some Muslim countries where I know some people are afraid to go. If you're, although if you're into architecture, if you're into some interesting food, if you're into visiting cultures that are mysterious to many of us Westerners, I wouldn't feel right if I didn't have a series on some of the wonders and the adventures of visiting Islamic countries. Um, to start with, you may or may not know this. This is, by the way, this is just an average guy passing by on horseback. We're in the country of Jordan, on the outskirts of. You'll see in a minute one of the world's great ancient sites, Petra, which is a beautifully preserved ancient city in Jordan. But it's everyone has worries and fears about going places. I understand that, and we're all the same about that. Sometimes things we don't know about make us nervous. I get it. Um, when my wife and I first went to a Muslim country, I'm half Jewish, by the way, and I have a Jewish last name. There's always concern that you might not be welcome. Instead, what I have found, this is my experience, that um, in Islam, there's this amazing, long-standing tradition of welcome. So instead of being chased or kidnapped or anything like that, you may well find that every other person you meet is saying things to you like, please, please, you are American? Please, or you are Australian? Please, will you come to my house? My wife will cook for you. She'll make dinner, or I would like to make tea for you right now. The stranger is treated like a king, so that trying to allay fears. Jordan, by the way, is still hopefully still an ally of the U.S. and so hopefully it's as welcoming as it always has been for travelers. To get into this is to the ancient city of Petra. Your first experience is you hike for about 2 hours through this wind carved cavern called the Seek. My photo, I tried, but it doesn't really capture the stunning colors of the cavern itself. And then comes the moment when you're in this dark cavern, and this is a second where you first see the glowing, really beautifully preserved ancient remains of this, ancient city of Petra. This again, photography is a part of what I do, and I work hard on it. So this again, I think I lucked out in my simple camera, allowing for this glow to sort of contrast with the darkness around it. This happens to be the Indiana Jones person here, happens to be my wife, Kathy. I'm not sure where she got that pith helmet, but she had this is a shot that ended up on the front of the Boston Globe, and was she happy? She was not. Not happy. She said, "The future, you got to ask my permission." Okay, sorry. Um, People will sometimes ask me, "What is the most exotic overall country you've ever been to?" Really hard to answer. Um, but I often think that it's Morocco. It's a North African Muslim country, again, very friendly and super, super duper like being in a movie. You feel like you're in the movie Casablanca. You're getting lost in twisty, tiny alleys in cities like Marrakesh and Fez. Um, and you're hearing several times a day the call to worship. You're transported to really completely different universe. This is Kathy again, our friend Martha. Behind all the architecture is just indescribable. The colors even are different than ours. But behind these doors are often beautiful hotels called riads or restaurants with excellent couscous and other terrific, interesting food. Um, this is Marrakesh, a fort in Marrakesh, looking out at Morocco's Atlas Mountains. Um, it's another country that has a whole bunch of different climates, and you can go from very hot 90 degrees Marrakesh in a day to go up with a driver up into the Atlas Mountains where it's freezing cold at night and spend a night, if you're up for it, in a Bedouin tent encampment. Lots of blankets if you need them and rugs, but it's quite fascinating. Staying in the Muslim world for a few more slides, we've got a clue here. What country are we in? There's a clue.
Egypt.
Very good. Anyway, so he's right. These are the Great Pyramids, and so Egypt is one of those places, again, very welcoming. What's this guy selling? He's selling camel rides. Um, this is not my wife. This is somebody from my trip who happens to be get buying a camel ride. Camels, and has anyone ever ridden a camel? You have. Wait, Alex. Okay, where?
In Israel.
Oh, you had. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So, was it comfortable?
Not particularly. They do not smell good.
That was my next question. Yeah, and they make you smell not so good too after you get off them sometimes. But a little bit like, you know, riding a very rocky small boat or something, right?
Yeah, that sums it up.
But Egypt, if you go, a lot of wonder and beauty, incredible place. Um, I would suggest if you can take there are cruises that go up and down the Nile River, and where you get to get off at amazing, huge, and beautifully preserved temples. This is Karnak Temple in Luxor. Look at how clearly and beautifully preserved the hieroglyphics are. Um, Truly great, gift to be able to see things like this. Um, anyway, among the different articles I ended up writing about being in the Middle East and being in Islamic countries was this one for the Boston Globe. I may have said this, maybe not, but I'm desperately always working as hard as I can not to try to, rewrite the same story that's been written a million times before. So I tried to write about Morocco, picking up on. I'm sure I'm betting that Arthur's been to Paris. Have you, Arthur? Yeah, figured. Anyway, so because of my wife's job with a big American company, we were lucky and got to live in Paris for a couple of years when we were in our 30s. So, in writing about Morocco, because it had French colonial ties. I tried to pick up on the reminders of French life that are all over the place in Morocco. And you can see the same photo you saw earlier on the in the globe. Um, okay, as threatened, we're now down at the bottom of the world. This is your most, aside from going into space, this is going to be the most exotic trip you're going to take, probably. Um, we're in Antarctica, the white continent. Notice free parka, different color, because I'm taking a different shipping line to get down to Antarctica. Um, I was fortunate to go down there on a ship run by a Swedish company called Lindblad Expeditions. Lindblad, oh, they're great. It sounds like I'm promoting them, only in that they were the first to take passengers to Antarctica back in the late 1960s. That's how recently. Um, uh, Before the late 1960s, no tourists ever went down to Antarctica at all. Okay, but if you're up for it, you're going to have to carve out several weeks of your time, um, and you're going to leave from the southern tip of Argentina. There's a town called Ushuaia, um, and you're gonna cross some very rough ocean straits to get down to the Antarctic Peninsula. It takes several days. I've heard, I don't know if you've met people who claim they never get seasick. Have you? I've met people who claim all sorts of stuff like that. On my small-ish ship, the Endeavor, going from southern tip of Argentina to Antarctica, everybody was seasick. Everybody, including the crew. It's the only, I've been on a lot of ships and a lot of rough water. It's the only ship I've been on where the crew ran ropes around the furniture to rope it together during the passage. Um, Switch to black and white for this shot. This is in Antarctica, where our captain was nice enough to sail our hardened ship as far as it would go into a frozen bay. And you notice that we passengers are being allowed out, which we were, to have the incredible experience of walking almost completely around the hull of our ship, which is quite an experience. Um, Aside from us signing, waivers and stuff, any guesses about what had to happen before we passengers were allowed out on the ice? Well, they had to test for thickness, for ice thickness. So I had figured, oh, gee, they're going to have some high tech way of doing this. Nope. Their way of doing it was lowering sailors over the edge of the deck with ropes tied around their waists. And the sailors pounded bamboo poles on the ice. Gotta love it. But it's not like, some pond in, Mamaroneck during, January. It was thick, thick ice. So no worries. Um, this is the shot, as you know, that you saw at the beginning. Um, this is because I was writing a piece. I got to come ashore a little early where the crew was setting up. Crew was, even in Antarctica, you're constantly hiking places. You're sliding down snowy and icy hills, so you're getting around. But the crew has to get you safely ashore using inflatable, rubberized Zodiac boats. So here they are setting up a hike. Who's this gentleman?
An elephant seal?
Bingo, bingo. It's really amazing. All I can say is I'm super impressed. But yep, that's exactly. Are they okay, Arthur? Are they mean or are they nice?
Well, they can be pretty aggressive, I guess.
They can be, you're right. But the thing about um Antarctica is kind of like the Galapagos Islands, where the animals and birds who live there haven't, because humans haven't been around, they haven't evolved the usual fear that animals and birds have about humans. So in this case, these guys were just completely cool with us being around them. And so when that happens, you have to be really careful not to mess with their daily routines stuff, because they didn't have the usual nervousness. um Somebody had mentioned penguins. Gee, there's an emperor penguin. I thought, for before I got to go to Antarctica, I thought, well, gee, I might get lucky and see like 30 or 40 penguins. You land in bays in Antarctica where, oh boy, there are cities of 20,000, 30,000 penguins. Do penguins smell good? There goes Alex again. Okay, shaking her head no. They they don't. But I think they probably think we don't smell good, probably. They smell like fish because that's what they eat, but sort of rotten fish. Um, but what an experience being around them and seeing them slip into under waves as they go fishing. The females often do the fishing just like female lions do the hunting. Sometimes with our big red parkas, we tourists would be waddling around, and younger penguins would waddle up to us and let out a little whistle apparently a little whistle. Every mommy penguin coming back from a hunt supposedly knows her penguin chick's special whistle. Um, so we were being mistaken for mommy. It's quite an honor. Lastly, a few just odd, out there, crazed Mandel travel stories that have nothing to do really with anything you've seen. But anyway, me trying to find a different way to write about Bangkok, Thailand. It's like a lot of places been written about a million times. So this piece for the Washington Post, in Bangkok and in Singapore, you can have a dress or a suit made in like 30 hours. So my friend Kevin and my wife Kathy had a traditional silk dress made, and Kevin had a tuxedo made. So I built my story around their kind of crazed adventures having that done. Um, this is another kind of strange story for the humor in it, and for other reasons. Editor at the Boston Globe let me hike a strip mall. um, why are you doing this? My wife asked, and I'm like, I'm not sure, but it's there. Um, I think part of the point of the story was that when we're writing about adventure, we're always writing about far off stuff, and we often forget about the geography that's right in front of us. Even strip malls that we see every day are full of strange landscaping. And even though it's a universe for cars, it was fun for me to pretend to be a serious hiker and encounter it that way. Lastly, last but not least, who are these theme park characters we're looking at?
A SpongeBob.
Yep, that's SpongeBob, and this is SpongeBob's best friend, Patrick. Okay, what is Patrick? He's a starfish, I think. Anyway, so for a story, the Washington Post had this series called The Insider, dispatches from behind the scenes of travel industry. So I got to train as a theme park character at there's a theme park in Virginia called King's Dominion theme park, and so I had the experience of spending a day as Patrick the Starfish in the suit. I couldn't be SpongeBob because Arthur could be, because you can't you have to be smaller. If you're under 5'5", you could be SpongeBob. I'm bigger than that, so I had to be Patrick. It's fine with me, except I took a little mini thermometer inside the suit after I had my training, and it was like 106 degrees in there. Um, you have to use the eyes of your character to see while you walk, and they fog up. They almost immediately fogged up. So at one point, I was got wedged into a door or something. So my handlers are not happy about that. Um, Quite an experience with how different kids react to you. Some, oh gosh, one kid pulled down my pink pantaloons. Another kid kind of punched me in a little area that was clear of the suit, and that hurt. But a lot of little kids, tiny little kids, would say they want a hug, which was cute. Um, and so you're told, this is the last point I'll make about being a theme park character. You're instructed, under no circumstances are you to utter a single word. And I'm like, why not? And they said, because it's really important that our theme park characters do not go out of character and say or do things that they wouldn't do on a TV show or in a comic. I'm like, okay, I get it. Um, the other thing was, they tell you that they'll be watching you. The handlers, the park employees will be watching you. So next time you're at Disney or whatever, the park employees actually dressed up to look like tourists, as they make sure their theme park employees don't go out of character. So next time you're at Disney or some other theme park, look for people who might be park employees disguised as tourists. But finally, I felt I had to go against my instructions because some tiny little girl um, asked me very earnestly. She said, "Patrick, I love you," and so I couldn't resist. So I had to bend over and say, "I love you too." So luckily nobody heard. So that's my story, guys, or stories. Who has, that's our tour. Who has um stuff that you want to talk about or
Oh,
questions?
oh, I do.
Okay.
I want to touch a little bit on the writing craft side of things. I'm curious um, about your experiences. Were you a freelance writer? Did you have a relationship with one paper for a while and then in a magazine, or and how
Yeah.
did you pitch your stories? Did you come up with it yourself, or did they throw you ideas?
Great questions, all on point. So starting out as a travel writer, okay, this is the hard time when you've got to produce, oh, one or two sample articles that show what you can do, okay, and some photos that show that you can take good shots, okay. And I actually teach travel writing through the Writers Center in Washington D.C. But so once you convince an editor or two to sometimes they will buy that particular sample story you've written and the photos as this is but you've got to be persistent, send it out a lot until an editor or two says, you know what, I like your style. I'm either going to run this piece that you sent me, or I'm going to give you another different assignment because I like your style. Okay. So after, if you're lucky, after a year or a year and a half or more, several editors will know your work and you'll be part of a group of writers and photographers that they rely on. Are you with me? So at that point, it's a combination of you pitching ideas to the editors you normally work with. Okay, you're constantly pitching them. How about this? And how about this? And how about this? And they might say yes to one of those. Okay, or sometimes they'll say to you, "Hey, Peter, you're a kind of guy who likes crazed adventures. We want a piece on kayaking to the Statue of Liberty from Manhattan where you grew up. Would you do that?" Of course, I'm like, sure, heck yes, if I want to accept that assignment. Did I answer your questions fairly? Okay. And by the way, there's never any guarantee. Every once in a while, you get an assignment with an editor who trusts you and you trust them, and they'll say, you know what, this didn't work. This didn't work for us. Um, you know what? So that then that piece you're going to have to try to sell it somewhere else. So my usual outlets were the Washington Post, the Boston Globe, the LA Times, National Geographic Kids magazine, because I also write books for kids. So that was a whole different kind of way of writing for me. But what else?
Did
I
you
had
ever
a
want to?
question.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Arthur.
Thank you. I have a question. What was the hardest animal like to take a picture of, or that was like
Ooh,
complicated to get a
that's
shot
an
of?
interesting one. The most difficult animal to take a picture of. There are some that I completely failed to get good pictures of. So, um, gee, let me think of a good example. Birds, okay, are hard because they're moving so fast and their wings are moving fast and they're blurry, right? So in the Galapagos, they have these cool looking birds called blue-footed boobies. If you haven't seen a picture, look them up. And they're doing all kinds of interesting things. Like they kind of do like almost sword a little sword fight with their bills. Okay. And so I was really eager to get a good shot. And, I kept trying. I got bad shots, but they're moving fast. So I would say blue-footed boobies. Thank you.
Yes. Well, sadly, I'm gonna have to leave. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Arthur. You're the best. I hope you take over my job someday. And hope you get to go into outer space. You'd be really good out there. Anyway, so what else? Sarah, you had a question?
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. You're muted, I think, Sarah.
Did you ever think you liked the place so much you'd like to live there, just pick up sticks and just live there?
Oh yeah, actually, great question. So well, because we're so lucky about this Paris, 2.5 years, we almost considered staying, because really liked European style of life where you don't have as much stuff, but we walked everywhere, and my wife was working hard for a big American company, so I would every day go to a little grocery store and a bakery, get our dinner, and that was our perfect for us. We didn't have a car while we were there, so that's what we love. But another place, so France is always in the back of our minds. Um, Another place we just real just taken by surprise is Buenos Aires, Argentina. If you've ever considered going, or if you've been, it's got a vibe and a cool aspects of its own cultures, but it's like a whole bunch of it's like a patchwork quilt of European cultures. There's big Italian neighborhoods, Spanish neighborhoods, French neighborhoods. It's a very sophisticated city with great food and beautiful parks. So we didn't do it. We were thinking, gee, it's summer down here when it's winter up north. Maybe what if we tried to buy a little apartment? So that was another. Thanks. Good question. Well,
With
guys,
the I
yeah.
had a question about your interactions with the animals. For example, the polar bears and some of the animals in Africa. What sort of precautions or approaches were taken so that you're observing them in a natural setting, but they're not getting used to humans? Because when they get used to humans, that can sometimes lead to negative things for the animals. So what
Oh,
sort of
absolutely.
precautions would be taken so that that didn't happen?
Should be more, certainly. So I would say that's a real issue. And I've talked this over with some guides, and they're like, well, let me tell you something, that the animals that tourists see in Africa or anywhere really are the animals that are they're the most bold. That they're the ones showing themselves, and they do it. The guides get to know actually the animals that um, are more sociable, for lack of a better word, and will pop out and be around safari vehicles. So I don't know if this is explaining this in a proper way to you, but it's almost like it's self-selection of wild animals, where there's some that are curious and bold, and they're the ones who are often around safari tourists, and the other animals are the vast majority don't show themselves at all. So it's not quite as invasive as it may sound, although as more and more people do go and see animals, and the Galapagos is this is really relevant to your question. The Galapagos is becoming, and I feel guilty about this, it's becoming a real tourist mecca, and it's the animals. They're seeing tour groups. It's a small space. The islands there are tiny, and I think we need to have some real measures to restrict the numbers of we humans who go to a place like that. Very hard for it to absorb the numbers that they're getting now. But great question.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your talk and sharing your photos and stories.
That was a pleasure. My pleasure, actually. Great group, and wow, Arthur, this guy, I tell you. Someday. Anything else? Well, just want to say thanks then. And thanks for hosting. And if anyone has questions, you can always go to my website, petermandel.net, and email me. If you have a later question or something, feel free, okay, to email me. All right?
Thank you so much.
Have a
This
great
was
night.
wonderful.
Oh, thank you. It was
Thank
great.
you.
I really enjoyed it. I really did. Next
Thank
time
you.
I go past Mamaroneck, I won't say Mamaroneck.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
All right. I'm gonna log off, Sarah. Nice to meet
Okay.
you.
Good night. Thanks, Good night.